Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? It is Monday night, what is that? April 27th at about 10 p.m. in the Menzer residence. I hope you're all doing well. I take it that all of you now know that there will be no school finals. So I don't really see that changing much, except that we don't really need to take any review tests. But we pretty much go until the last day. We have a lot of cool stuff to talk about and a lot of good stuff coming. So beyond the cancellation of a test, I think these ed puzzles are going pretty well. I hope you guys are enjoying the lecture. We'll continue with the flip grids as well, so I can hear you guys. And I'm definitely open to doing Google Hangouts or Google Meets if you guys want. We just gotta we should probably cap them at 30 or 40 minutes, and we should make it class by class, not put all 106 potential U.S. history students that I have in one Google Meet because it'll be chaos. So definitely reach out, give feedback, let me know what's going on out there. Um, I don't want to kill you with schoolwork. I don't think that I am. I'll try to keep these videos, definitely under 30 minutes and really just give you questions on the main points that you're then going to see on the exam. So it really winds up serving as a really good review for the unit exams that we'll be taking. So I'm trying to think the way I'll break up the rest of the year because typically after World War II and then Cold War, things get a little bit more. We usually do the last few decades by decade and by presidential administration. So I have to kind of see how I want to play that because the way the Regents is there is not a ton of questions really asked after the 1960s. Maybe the last 20% of the test, maybe even less than that really would be the 1960s forward. Okay, so we are in day two of the New Deal. Remember where we're at? We're in the early 1930s. We're somewhere in the 1932 to 1935 range. All right, we're early on New Deal. Okay, um, now I don't know if you remember learning about the Great Depression and the New Deal during eighth grade U.S. history, but they probably talked about FDR and the three R's, which were relief, recovery, and reform. So relief is kind of that stop the bleeding stage, which we are currently talking about with the banking crisis and with the unemployment crisis, and then with the agricultural crisis. That is all basically relief, then recovery, which we'll talk about as we move further into the New Deal, because it's like you stop the bleed to help things stabilize, okay? Then you start to add, all right? That would be the recovery phase, where you're going to start to add to the economy. And definitely the war is going to officially pull us out of the Great Depression and bring us right back to full employment. And then the last is the reform to make sure that doesn't happen again. So you're going to see like little bits of reform throughout the entire New Deal. So you could say like 1932 all the way to 1940. But you're going to see, for example, what we talked about yesterday with the banking crisis, if we go back for a second, the Emergency Banking Act would be the relief part of it. The FDIC would be the reform part of it, if you think about it, because it still exists today. And it still has the same purpose that people could have confidence in the banks because the federal government will guarantee up to 250,000. But I just added this actually to the PowerPoint. I want you to look at this business cycle, and you're going to learn about this in whatever economics you take next year, whether it's the government economic honors or the regular economics or AP economics. This is a big part of this. So if you look at this cycle, the business cycle here, and if hopefully you can see this cursor. So you have prosperity on your way up. It's going to peak, and this is natural. All right, this is very natural. Then you're going to start to have a recession. All economies or free market economies go in these kinds of waves. Okay, so you have your peak, and then you have your trough. Okay, depression. I mean, it's saying that depression is here. But we're talking about, if I showed you what this looked like in the early 1930s, this is much, 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 much sharper and further down, okay, below the depression line than this is showing. This is showing a relatively normal situation. And what happens over time, and how an economy grows is these peaks go higher and higher. So this peak would be up here, then we would come down again. Then the next bottom would be not as bad as the previous bottom, and then we would make a new peak. And that is how an economy actually grows over time. Now, the problem during this part of the cycle, the potential problem, is inflation, where people don't know, people are spending lots of money. Okay? So the more money that's spent, the more the value of what they're buying goes up. And without more wages, you're technically inflating prices. So if the market conditions, happen at the same time where that can take effect, all right, then that can start to push us this way. All right. Now, what happens here is that as the price of goods go down and businesses make less money, unemployment starts. So inflation is the problem here, and unemployment is the problem here. Now, and I won't get into this too much, but the federal government and Federal Reserve, they have different measures that they can use when we're at different points of the business cycle to combat these situations. Now, that the modern policies did not exist at this point in time. FDR is going to start slowly to employ, like we talked about yesterday, the economic ideas of John Maynard Keynes, that you could spend money, deficit spending, in times like this in order to stimulate the economy. Now, if you think about it, 25% unemployment is the worst the country has ever been. Today, I have seen anywhere between 14 and 16%, and there are many economists that are saying that we could hit levels of the Great Depression, meaning that we could get to 25% unemployment because of COVID-19. Now, here is the silver lining and the only play. Our government right away knows and knew and will know more that they need to continue to spend money in order to stop unemployment from being 25%. Just in the sense of the unemployment is going to exist, but the unemployment benefits that are going to help the people be able to remain in their homes, in their cars, and spend, in food. Okay, all of that helps to keep the economy running. So they didn't understand that back then. They're going to start doing it now. All right, and our government already knows how to do it. Now that's just one step of it, because you can't give unemployment forever. So you got to get people back to work, and that is what FDR is going to do. And he's going to create a number of different little pieces of administration within his bureaucracy, his executive branch of government. He is going to create various, kind of alphabet soup of public works projects. Okay, meaning that you're making things for the public good. Now, 1933, Congress creates the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, which provided grants to local agencies to help those affected. So all of these kind of CCC, WPA, PWA, and the WPA, and then the TVA, and then the AAA, they are all going to be parts of this 1933 Federal Emergency Relief Administration. Now, what you are doing here is you are making the government bigger, because you are going to be taking people who are unemployed and people who are employed in different sectors, but you're going to give them a better job, okay? You are then going to be hiring them. So the federal government will be playing company when it comes to, okay, you need a job, I want you to build a bridge. Here's this wage, go do it, okay? Now, 1930, and I'm just going to give you a bunch of examples, and you probably heard of some of these before. And I'll show you a bunch of pictures of things that they built and different pieces of advertising that they used to kind of draw people to what they were doing. So 1933, Congress created the Civilian Conservation Corps, which for unemployed young men in the acts of forest preservation, flood control, improving national parks. By 1942, at the end of the program, they had over 3 million people working for them. Think about that. So the federal government employing 3 million people within, 9 years. They made government wages $30 a month. That was another big point. If government can set the wage, and these people need money, not only to catch up, but to try to help improve the economy and improve buying, right? Which would then improve companies, and companies would then hire more people. So it's almost like the government is stepping in and creating a service or a project that people can work on so that it helps get the economy moving again. I think that should make sense for everybody. So the Civilian Conservation Corps, Okay. We have another poster here, a young man's opportunity. All right. Now the public works project, public works, right? So things that the public needs. What do the public need? They need tunnels. They need bridges. They need roads. They need dams. They need airports. They need schools. They need parks. They need theaters. Okay. They need stadiums. All right. I don't know if I said, but they need hospitals. So just some examples here. New York City's RFK Bridge, which was the Triborough Bridge. I would imagine that most of you have been on that. That connects Queens and the Bronx. All right. If you ever go to Yankee Stadium, there's a good chance that you go over that bridge. And the highway from Miami to the Keys in Florida, which is like that like intercoastal looking highway. I don't know if any of you have ever driven from Miami down into the Keys, but there is a long, like kind of suspended road that that travels down through the ocean. I guess that's the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean, all the way into the Keys. Civil Works Administration directly hired workers for construction, highways, tunnels, airports, courthouses. By 1934, more than 4 million employed. So you're seeing some big numbers here. This isn't like I think Macy's recently fired 100,000 workers. I think Amazon is set to hire tens of thousands of workers. We're talking about millions of workers here, and that's by 1934. So that's within the first year or year and a half of this thing being created. So these guys were working on sewer lines. I forget how many tens of thousands of sewer line mileage was placed under the ground in various parts of the country. These are guys building a street. This is a Works Progress Administration advertisement to come and work for them. That's Midway Airport in Chicago. That's LaGuardia Airport in New York City. That is the Triborough, now RFK Bridge. Now, the Tennessee Valley Authority, all right? And the other big one is the Hoover Dam, which if you've ever been out to Las Vegas, you may have taken a drive to see it. The Hoover Dam was to prevent floods, to give irrigation, but really the big thing was to bring hydroelectric power, which winds up becoming the power that runs Las Vegas, which is a city of 3 million people. I don't have a picture of it here, but the Hoover Dam is pretty cool. I believe it's the Colorado River. Now, the Tennessee Valley Authority, you don't want to be doing these things just in cities. And yeah, job loss was terrible in cities, but rural areas took a hit as well. Okay. Just as much as cities. The cities are just a little more public, I would assume. And FDR is more of a city type person, but the problems existed in rural areas as well. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that now. So the Tennessee Valley Authority built a series of dams to prevent floods and deforestation along the Tennessee River, provide cheap electric power for homes and factories in a 7-state region, very rural, very isolated. They provided electricity for homes and factories. Just think about that. New York City had electricity from I think the late 1880s. Okay, this is what now? This is about 45 years later. They're going to have a government project to bring electrification to these rural areas. So the TVA put the federal government for the first time in competition with the private business of providing electricity. So that's an interesting point because today government has a lot of involvement, state, local, and federal government really, in the companies that bring us our energy. Because back then in a rural area, electricity was obsolete. They didn't have it. It was considered an immense luxury. Today, our power goes out I think my power went out a couple weeks ago during that bad windstorm, okay? And we had just gotten a bunch of grocery delivery, obviously with everything that's going on. And the power goes out, like right towards the end of the storm. So the next thing I know, I'm driving to the bevy to get bags of ice to take the entire refrigerator full of fresh produce into coolers and iced it down. And I think like 7 or 8 hours, we finally got our power back and everything was fine. But think about that, 8 hours without power, and we almost had a meltdown over here. All right. And, these people didn't have power. So all things are relative, I guess. Now, the government sees economic development of the interior of the western part of this country, good for the nation. All right, they don't want to be forgotten about. Farmers supported the Democrats and FDR, so he's going to be helping them as well. So the New Deal in agriculture. Um, Remember, farmers have been struggling for a while. It was one of the original like warning signs for the Great Depression that was to be coming, because farm prices never really stabilized after World War One. They grew a ton of product and made a ton of money during World War One, and what happens is they have too much of it, and it never really levels back out. Like the consumption must have spiked that much that they couldn't get it back down. And what that did was it put big time downward pressure on livestock and crop prices, which hurts farmers. And farmers are a big percentage of the workforce. So part of the New Deal is they are going to pass an Agricultural Adjustment Act, raising farm prices by limiting production and paying farmers to plant less. So farmers are growing at a quantity that they can be profitable at or make the most money at, not necessarily a quantity that is going to reduce the overall supply of food that is out there, which is ultimately what's going to set the prices. So they are actually going to say, produce less so we can drive the supply down and help raise the prices of food, okay? And we will pay you the difference. So whatever you were making last year, we will subsidize that just for you to grow less. I mean, can you imagine that, right? You're paying somebody to be less productive. They help property owning farmers, but not the majority of farmers who work on land they don't own. So this is one of those limitations, and it's happening right now. If you look at the stimulus money, there's already a lot of negativity swirling about, did the right companies get the money? Did the small businesses? Did some of your parents' businesses, or like for example, my real estate business is actually I can take like an economic disaster loan for a sole proprietorship. There was all sorts of money that was allocated for small businesses, but then the money was gone in a matter of days. They just released another 485 billion, I think, for small businesses. And you've already heard like Shake Shack gave $10 million back. Shake Shack doesn't need the money. The LA Lakers, I forget the number. I want to say it was 12 or 18 million. They gave that money back today, because once the media and everybody finds out that they help these billionaire sports teams and these billionaire, hundreds of billionaires companies, there's going to be all sorts of public outlets for them to give that money back and give it to the small business, to the restaurants, to the local businesses that are struggling right now because they've been forced to close. Okay. So I don't remember if you read Grapes of Wrath or where you are in your English curriculum, but Grapes of Wrath was a John Steinbeck book, who also wrote Of Mice and Men. I think you guys read that, or maybe last year or this year you're reading it. But it was a novel written about the Dust Bowl situation. So there was a long period of drought. Mechanical tools broke up the topsoil, which loosened it, and a series of bad windstorms whipped up the soil, affecting Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Colorado, and over 1 million moved further west from those areas. All right? And check out this picture. Okay? This causes problems in being able to live, first of all, but also to be able to grow crops, because it destroys the soil and it blocks the sunlight from their ability to grow things. So the economy is going to get devastated in these areas. Farmers are going to get devastated in these states where this thing affected them so poorly. Okay, let's end there. New Deal in housing. You know what? Let's get to the first New Deal wrap up. All right. So, housing is obviously going to be an issue. If people are out of work, they can't afford housing. They can't afford their own house. And housing really spurs the economy. Like if you notice, Home Depot and Lowe's are open, right? So you want to build something in your house, and maybe some of your parents are. I know I have neighbors doing all sorts of crazy things out here. Um, it it's an economic catalyst, because like think about all the people that you employ in your house, right? So like since I bought this house, I have hired somebody to do the wood floors. I have hired a tiler, somebody to tile. I have hired electricians, plumbers, carpenters for bathrooms, for basements, The blinds behind me, right? This is plantation shutters. We hired that guy. In-ground sprinklers, grading, planting, masonry, roofer, cider. And guess what? I didn't hire one person to do all of those things. There's probably literally been somewhere between 50 and 75 workers in this house in the last 6 years. Okay. Now, listen, they weren't here for a full year, but they go to my house, then they go to your house, then they go to somebody else's house. And all of those people are earning a living and then going out and spending money. So home ownership is very, very important. Home construction and home building is very, very important. And more of like the social aspect of it is middle class respectability. When more people are able to buy homes, we don't want to go in a backward trajectory. Okay, we want to go up. We want home ownership to increase because homes can be the cornerstone of wealth and long-term wealth. So depression is going to kill the housing market. We have mass foreclosures. That's when people stop paying their banks. They come and they take the house away from you, and you have no new building. So that's going to be an enormous drain on the economy. It always is. 2008 Great Recession, where unemployment, I should put this into perspective. So we're at 14 to 16 now. Great Recession, I believe, topped out at 11% amidst a bank bailout and a real estate bailout and an insurance bailout and then eventually an auto bailout. So they're going to create the Federal Housing Administration, which still exists today. There is one of the, you guys know I'm a real estate agent, one of the main loans that buyers take is an FHA loan, and that is a New Deal creation in the executive branch, ensuring millions of mortgages given by private banks. So banks, they didn't want to lend money in this economy because to certain people because they didn't feel like they were going to get paid back. So they had risk and they didn't like the risk, so they didn't want to give out loans to a lot of people. If you want the banks to give out more loans, the government needs to back or insure those mortgages so that if, let's just say they give me a loan, I lose my job, I can't pay the bank. The bank now doesn't have money to go out and make more money with, so now there starts to be a strain on the bank. The government stepped in and said, we will back it. So if he loses his job and he can't pay, we will make you whole. We will buy the loan from you. Okay? So the FHA and then later the VA, which helps service people be able to get cheaper loans, help tens of millions own homes, which is cheaper than actually renting. Okay. And I don't need to wax poetic on the difference between renting and buying. In a place like Long Island, in New York, in the tri-state area, owning a home over 20, 30, 40 years has been very, very profitable. It's basically, if at anything, it's a forced savings account where you're going to get most of the money, if not all of the money, if most people make money over longer times, all back versus renting where you're just paying each month and you're never going to see anything for that money. All right, first New Deal wrap up. First 2 years of FDR's first term is a mixture of success, failure. It was a series of experiments. Remember, his brain trust, scientists, lawyers, doctors, professors, intellectuals. 21st Amendment, they repealed prohibition, finally. That passed in 1918, and in 1933, they're going to repeal it with another amendment, the 21st Amendment. So liquor is legal. They were drinking it the entire time anyway. And like I said, when we did prohibition, is many people say that the organized crime in this country really proliferated during that period. You make something widely consumed illegal that people can still get, they're going to pay more money for it. A criminal element is going to pop up and is going to take over that industry. The creation of the FCC overseeing broadcast and telephone. Okay. The creation of the SEC still exists today, regulates stock market and bond markets. So when you hear of Wall Street people going to jail for insider trading, it is typically the SEC that watches them. And like I have some friends that work in either corporate law or in banking, Wall Street, and it's crazy. Like if you say anything, like they won't say anything on the phone to you. Like I have a buddy who is general counsel for a company called Carvana, which you may have heard of. They do commercials. He's out in Scottsdale, Arizona, right? So the stock was down to like $20, and then it ripped up to $120. And I happened to look at it one day, and I sent him a screenshot of it, and I made a joke. I said, "Thanks for letting me know, buddy." I mean, $20 to $120. I mean, that's 6 times the cost. So that you could turn what, $10,000 into $60,000. I think it happened over a couple of weeks. So the first thing he said is, "Yeah, I don't want to go to jail." And they're very well instructed. You don't email with your friends, with your parents, text, call. They can watch. Any of that can be used against you if you were to tip the hand to something that you knew about a company where a stock was going to go up. And it turned out that there was a lot of shady practices going on in the buildup in the mid to late 1920s that helped to speculate and push those stock values up. The SEC was now going to be able to come in and do something about it. Okay. People that like pump and dump schemes, kind of like what the Wolf of Wall Street, right? Jordan Belfort was doing. So he was calling older people and through sales tactics was pushing penny stocks and pushing a lot of big money into penny stocks, which penny stocks, I mean, are largely worthless companies. I mean, a couple of them, wind up making it and become something. But for the most part, I mean, they are wildly speculative. The majority of them fail and people lose all of their money. So pump and dump is you pump up the price of the stock while you're buying the stock. And then when it gets to a certain point, you dump out of all your shares, which considerably drops the price of the stock, and you just got your money and all of your profits out of the stock, right? So if a stock's at a penny and I buy, $10 million worth of it, then I call all of you and I convince you to buy it. That stock could go up to $5, $10, who knows what it could get up to. Then I know the stock is basically worthless, but you believed me that it wasn't because I'm in that business and I am acting like I know something. Okay, like I'm on the inside and I'm selling that information to you. That sort of thing is going to become illegal as a result of some of the practices in the 1920s. All right, provided relief to millions of the needy, did not end the Great Depression. End of 1934, we're still at 20% unemployment. So there's an improvement, but it's not enough. Okay, and the Great Recession and let's say the COVID-19 recession or whatever this thing is going to wind up being called, hopefully not a depression. Um, each time they learned that they got to do it quicker and they got to do more. The administration, the president, is already talking about an infrastructure project. We got plenty of things that they can build in this country. Okay, so if worse comes to worse and people need jobs, they could create work for people if they have to get that far. All right. So I hope you guys all have a good day tomorrow, or today, since you'll be listening to it. It will be Tuesday. Keep up the feedback, please. Let me know what's going on with you guys. I don't want to kill you with work. I do, as long as you like it, I like it that you're getting to hear and see me Monday through Thursdays. We'll continue to have nice and easy Fridays because I know you guys are working hard. And that's the plan, really, from here on out. Ed puzzle assignments, these YouTube audio lectures, and flip grids to check in, talk about things. If we can get something interesting to talk about based on the unit, but I just want to know how you guys are doing and what you think, and just connect, keep in touch. All right, have a good one. Later.